You know, we're learning Torah, and often people think, well, okay, you're learning Torah, so what's the connection between the study of Torah and davening and tefillahs? And in the Gemara, in the first Torah, he starts off with a very bold statement. He says, you should know that through Torah, your tefillahs are received. In other words, for some reason, Torah is a catalyst to require or to foster a power of prayer, but the power of prayer is counterintuitive. Instead of Rabbi Nachman saying that the power of prayer is that your prayers become so powerful, instead he focuses on the fact that you as an individual become so appealing. He calls this chayin, that you have grace. And he says that the chayin, the grace that you have that creates the appeal, is a derivative of two components. Chayin is comprised of two letters, a ches and a nun. And he says that the chet, Lashon ches, comes from the language of chius, which means life. And he says that the wisdom, there's a pasuk which says, HaChochma techayes ba'aleho, that wisdom revives the people that own it. And the way that Reb Nachman says it is that when you perceive life, when you look at life, you can see life on two different levels, two different layers. If you look at the externality of life, what you see is what appears to your senses. If you see a table, you see a table. If you see a camera, you see a camera. If you see a person, you see the external shell of the person. However, if you understand the chokhmah, which is the running mechanism behind the physical representation, you understand the origin, you understand where it's coming from, so then everything changes. And then you actually recognize that if you ask me a question and you say to me, tell me, I'll say this to you, Teddy, what's more real, this table or the idea that the carpenter had when he designed the table? The design is more real or the table is more real? Table. You can hear it as I knock it, I can feel it, I can touch it, I can smell it, I can taste it. It's there. I can comprehend it. But watch this. Were I to take out my virtual flamethrower and incinerate the table, and all that would be left from the table is a series of ashes, but I would still retain the plan, the idea, the design in my mind. I could recreate the table by finding the materials and bringing it back to life. So the table is really origin. Its origin is in the world of thought, in the world of concept. And all this is a physical manifestation of an idea. But the idea is the reality, the soul, and the life force of the thing. You extract the idea, there's nothing there. You extract the thing, the idea still exists. And it can run throughout space and time. So really, the wisdom that is the internal ingredient or essence of every single thing is the thing that gives it life. So when you think about the letter ches, chius, which means life, you recognize that life is a consequence of the conceptual component of the thing. It's the idea that's alive. The idea is alive. This is essentially dead. By dead, I mean it has a point of termination. This day will one day be thrown into a garbage heap. But the idea will remain forever. So the real life, which means longevity and the capacity to exist beyond space and time, that is the core. The study of Torah, when approached with the right methodology and attitude, is the process whereby we have the capacity to uncover the surface to reveal what's inside, which is the chokhmah. And that creates life. The life has two components. On the one hand, the life enlivens us because it's exciting. On the other hand, the life gives us a certain sense of perception and depth into the world. That's the ches. In order to have your prayers received, you need to have grace, which is chayin. There's a nun. The language of nun is taken from a pasuk. The pasuk says that lifnei shemesh yinoin shmoi. In front of the sun, there's something called Yinoin, which is a language of Nun. The word Nun, says Reb Nachman, represents Malchus. Malchus is the power to actualize, to make something which is abstract real. So actually, the Chet and the Nun are the two disparate sides of creativity, the idea and the realization. The idea is this amorphous, ethereal, ephemeral, gigantic idea which exists beyond space and time, and when it's constricted and manifested into something tangible and real, that's called Nun. That's called Malchus. It's taking something, it's realizing, the power of realization. You can think and think, but if those thoughts remain abstract thought in the ether, it doesn't really do anything for the realization. The realization is Malchus. The two letters Chet and Nun, which means life and actualization, when they combine, they spell out the word Chen. The word Chen is grace. The purpose of Torah is to integrate the vast, magnificent, broad idea into the practical realization. That shift is called Chen. And that's why your tefillahs are received, because you get grace. You're received with Chen. Okay, so welcome to our new entrees. Great to have you guys with us. We just had a brief intro, but now we can kick into what we're here for. And what we're here for is as follows. There's a lot of confusion as to what is the way that we can integrate our spiritual practice into our daily lives. And as opposed to other spiritual systems, for example, in the Eastern world, thought is looked upon as primarily an obstruction to understanding. And the reason is, Shadow, that when you think about something, inevitably you're going to be thinking about it from a particular perspective, and therefore your perspective is going to be narrowed by your experience of your world, by your limited mental faculties, by your own personal internal biases. And therefore, when you think about the world, you're only going to be thinking about a very thin slice of reality. And therefore, one would think if you could somehow remove thought, because it acts as a barrier to the experience of reality, you could have a full experience of reality. And a lot of the Eastern systems of meditation aim to do that. Remove thought, and once the thought is now removed, so you can experience reality uncontaminated by cognitive pollution. The Jewish approach is radically different because we embrace thought. But the contention that thought is a limitation still exists. So how can you reconcile that? The way it's reconciled is by acknowledging that we can access a system of thought which is beyond our own personal experience of reality. That system of thought beyond our personal experience of reality is called the thoughts of God. The thoughts of God, of Hashem, are captured in what's called the Torah. So what happens is when we lock in to a Torah thought, we access the cognitive power at the same time as locking into the infinite wisdom of the universe. So as opposed to letting go and experiencing reality unbridled or uncontaminated by thought, we use thought as a point of access. And what we try to do is we try to integrate the thought processes which are essentially divine that we were given to on Har Sinai. And therefore, it's not only about content, because content doesn't rewire your neural pathways in terms of processing ideas. It's about content coupled with processing. It's not only about what you know, it's also how you think. And what the Gemara does is it educates us both in what to think about and how to think about it. And in doing so, we complete the integrated capacity to be able to lock into the spiritual world, which is immensely redemptive. And even though the topic of the particular point that we're discussing can be relatively arbitrary, we can be talking about some situation that the Talmud quotes, which is completely unrealistic. But nevertheless, since that particular situation reflects some element of the divine will, so when you lock into that, you're locking into a higher transcendent force, which is incredible. So when we sit and we learn, it's not just like, oh, we're studying ancient Jewish law. We're actually doing something completely different. And that's why you could perhaps argue why Torah is looked upon as the hinge upon which the entirety of our spiritual system revolves. Talmud Torah keneged kulam. It's the highest and most venerated form of our connection to Hashem. Certainly in terms of quantity, it's meant to be spend most of our time doing that. And in terms of quality, the Gemara says that all the mitzvahs in the world cannot weigh up to one single word of Torah. So when we sit down to do this, it's quite a powerful quest that we're about to enter into. And the goal of the next 5 days this week is to give you a set of skills that will empower you to navigate the Mishna, the Gemara, the Rashi, the Tosfos, with a protocol, a set of steps and a set of systems that you know when you say Mishnah, you do this, this, and that. When you say Gemara, this is what you need to do. When you say Rashi, you do this. When you say Tosfos, you do this. And then the rest of it is practice. And the truth is, to teach the skills is not a big deal. It can easily be done in the space of 5 days. To practice the skills is a lifetime's work. So having the skills is not the end, it's just the very, very beginning. Are we all on board? Nate, are you on board with us? Yes. Michelle? Good. Gabrielle? Jordanen? You with me? Zachariah? Ben, I don't know how to break this to you, but you're not officially a minority. In fact, I'll go so far as to say that you're the only Ben here today.
That's crazy. I think this is the first time I've been the only Ben in the room in the last 2 months. Wow.
I mean, the rate of attrition of Bens at this stage is something which is concerning. I think, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. We redeemed. There was a definitely, until now, like the majority of the people in the share have been named Ben. So I'm just pointing out that we've lost a good few Bens. Okay, so now, how do we do this? Well, let's begin in the very, very beginning. The beginning of thinking is thought. And if you think about thought, it goes like this. When you think a thought, your thought has anatomy to it. Your thought isn't just a monolithic big one clump of something. Your thought has a beginning, your thought has a middle, and your thought has an end. So in order to understand how to think, first of all, understanding how thought works. And this is how thought works. In the very beginning, you have something which is called input. In order to have any kind of thought, you need something to think about. You can't think about nothing because that's not thinking. So you need to input something. Now, generally, our input can be external or internal. External input means that I look around and I use my senses to think about things. So when I use my senses to think about things, so then I look, visual sense, and I look at Nate's curious eyes. And I think, oh my gosh, Nate's got curious eyes. Step number 1, though, is just visual. I just look at him. Step number 2 is once I've got that visual input, I now do something else, which is processing. I need to process the import of that sight that I've just seen. So I see his eyes, and I see they're curious. And the reason why I know they're curious eyes is because I make a comparison in my head to other eyes I've seen at other times, and I align those eyes with other kinds of eyes that I've seen, and then I conclude, oh, Nate's eyes are curious eyes, which means he's focused, he's engaged, he's present. Now that I know he's focused, engaged, and present, so now I can figure out, ooh, amazing. Now, what kind of thing can I do to get the message across? So now there's an output stage. There's an input, getting the thought into my mind. Processing is what's the relevance of the thought. Output is what I do with my conclusion in my mind. And what I do is I say, you with me, Nate? And that's verbal. That I now say something mixed with body movement, and eye contact. So every thought has got an input stage, processing stage, and an output stage. The importance of recognizing the three different phases of the thought process is when you're thinking about analysis of thought, which is really the direction we're going to go into. We want to figure out what's called metacognition. Metacognition means think about the way you think. It's thinking about your thoughts. It's metacognition. If I want to think about the way I'm thinking, I need to know what my thought is made up of. When I understand what my thought is made up of, then I'm capable of recognizing where my thoughts are bad and where my thoughts are good. I can think about the healthiness or the destructiveness of my thought processes. But I can only do that when I know what I'm thinking about. So I have to understand there are these three stages to the thought process. The next point is, though, each of these stages have underneath them different actions. So in the input stage, for example, there are sensory input, which means I have to make sure that my senses are functional. If I take off my glasses, I can't see whether Nate's looking at me or not because all of you are just one blurred fuzz or one furry bluzz. I can't see it. You're just an amorphous mass. You're an abstract picture. You're just shapes which have no beginnings and ends. And then I do this and everything changes. The danger is sometimes our input is impaired and we're not aware of it. So if something goes wrong in the input stage, everything we process will be corrupted and everything we output will be corrupted. For example, I see a dog coming towards me. I look at the dog and I start to see, is the dog aggressive or friendly? If the dog is aggressive, I notice by the fact that its teeth are bared, that its tail is straight, that its body is tense. Input. When I notice those things processing, I recognize, my gosh, this dog poses a danger. I've seen dogs like this before. Generally, the next thing they do is they bite. Output, I pick up a stone, I run away, I do something to defend myself against the dog. Good? Do you understand how those three phases work? Yes? What happens if I am short-sighted? And now I'm like this, and I see a dog coming towards me, and I go, ooh, doggy, doggy, doggy. The reason why I'm doing that is because my visual sense is impaired. I misinterpret what the dog looks like. I misinterpret all the signs, and then I think, oh, it looks like the dog is wagging his tail. Friendly dog, I'm going to go up towards him and give him a hug, and then I find his canines in my arm. Not a pleasant experience. So essentially, input is a crucial stage. Sensory input could be there's mental input. But the crucial thing about input is precision. Precision. If the input is corrupted, now why is this important? Because if there's a lack of precision in input, processing will become disabled. What is processing? Processing is comparison, is the most basic thought process. Comparison, analysis, seeing what the parts are. Synthesis, seeing how they get together. Induction, extrapolating, etc. Output is very different. Output generally focuses on actions, words, and shifted perspective. So you've got these three phases. I'll give an example of how this process, when you don't analyze it properly, can go awry. A young child was given this sum to do. Okay? So when you do them mentally in your head, you're probably going to come to a large number. That's the answer the kid gave. So the teacher said, the child has no capacity to do arithmetic. They should be sent off to a remedial school. But in fact, the child was completely capable of doing arithmetic. Here where the problem lay. The child could not differentiate spatially. Spatial orientation is an input function. You don't understand how things can move in space, so you can't differentiate between that and between that. To you, they look the same. So the child mathematically had perfect reasoning. It just looked at this instead of 7 times 8 is 7 plus 8. So when you have a faulted analysis of where your thinking is going wrong, so then you'll make some really bad conclusions as to how your thinking has been disrupted. And therefore, understanding how the thought process works is crucial to all good thinking. That's in the realm of general metacognition, understanding how your thoughts work. How does this bear relevance, and why is it pertinent for us when we're studying Gemara? Why do we need to know this? Because just as in a thought process, there are different components. It begins with input, then it goes to processing, then output. And by the way, this is sequential. You have to do it in this order. So too, in Gemara, you have to mirror this thought process in your stages of analysis. When you analyze the Gemara, it starts off with input, then processing and output. But to make it easier, the way that you're doing Gemara is your first thing is structure. Processing is called power questioning. And output is called paradigm shift, because that's the way this process lives in the world of Talmud. You've got structure, power questioning, paradigm shift. And I explained to you each what those things are in order to enable you and empower you in the study of Gemara. Structure, power questioning, paradigm shift makes for what we call STRUCTAPOPA. STRUCTAPOPA is structure, power questioning, and paradigm shift. These are going to be the 3 pillars of textual analysis. Wherever you go, wherever you decide to visit, whether it be the Gemara in Tmura, or the Orat Chaim on Chumash, or the Likutei Moran, you always have to understand what is the structure. Once the structure is clear, then you have to analyze it through power questioning. Once that's done, you have to recognize what has shifted in your perception from prior to the learning to after the learning in paradigm shift. And then we go through those things one by one. Are there any questions? I'm sorry for overwhelming you and annihilating your capacity to breathe with my overwhelming teaching style. Luckily, we have a Ben to the rescue. Rescue us, Ben.
Where does the internal reaction or feeling play in that role of process of God?
Great. So what happens is, I was speaking about mental input. This is what happens. You're in this room. All of a sudden, a thought pops into your mind. Thought pops into your mind is, wow, I look at all these people, I'm feeling really stupid. Once that thought goes into your mind, you compare yourself. You know, I remember when I was in class and I was 8 years old and I asked a question and everyone laughed at me. I'm stupid, I was stupid, I always will be stupid. Output, I'm not going to say a word. And those kind of thoughts are happening at rapid rates in our heads all the time, all the time, all the time. The more we become conscious of those thoughts, we can question them. And we can say, well, is that really true? Is it true? I mean, between 8 years old and now, I've done stuff. And even then, and then all of a sudden, you allow yourself to become, you know what, I think it was Da Vinci that said, an unexamined, or maybe it was someone else, an unexamined life is one not worth living. An unexamined life means I don't have the ability to step back and watch my thoughts and see how they're operating. Because until I can watch my thoughts, until I become metacognitive, I remain imprisoned in this world of thought that I don't even understand I'm in a prison. I'm like a fish swimming in water who doesn't know that there's water around them. I'm like a snail who thinks that a slug is someone that had a divorce and the wife took the house. It's a good chance. It's like, works better visually. Okay, so good, excellent. Tom.
If everyone has some level of inherent bias, how do we actualize getting to some kind of more neutral space where we can even process our inherent biases?
Brilliant. Excellent question. If someone has inherent bias, how do we actually get into some kind of straight thinking as opposed to crooked based on our own personal experiences? That's going to be part of this process. Is if we apply the method thoroughly and faithfully, then we're able to get there. Okay, good, fantastic. Okay, so now STRUCTAPOPA. I'm going to go through each one of these and show how these three things land up in Gemara and Mishna and Rashi and Tosfos. How crazy. Because you see, what's amazing about this system, Nate, is that when you know and you take STRUCTAPOPA wherever you go, Judd, so then you know, oh my gosh, if I want to get clarity, in my understanding, I know what I need to do. The minute, Zachariah, the minute you start doing this and you start the pursuit for clarity, something rather sinister will start to happen. Something which is dreadfully scary. Something which sends cold shivers down the spines of every Talmudic student. One can almost see the evil one's toothy smile, those sharp fangs, the angular face emphasizes the viciousness of it all. The sharp horns are there, and one sees this awful, awful, awful creature who is the ultimate enemy of the Talmudic student that seeks to pray and disrupt the STRUCTAPOPA train from running along its track. Vagueness. And once you fall into the hands and clutches of vagueness, your Talmudic capacity is doomed. It's gone. Because when you start saying things like, Jordan, yeah, the Mishna is cool. It tells me stuff about things. And you're unable to give the precise and well understood structure, you've lost. You've fallen into the hands of the enemy. And therefore vagueness is the thing that we seek to dismiss at every nook and cranny and at every turn and corner. Always be aware never to fall into the hands of the ultimate enemy of the Talmudic student, whose name is Mishael. His name's not Mishael. His name is there you go. There you go. George, what's his name? Could you say it with less enthusiasm? Just say, hey. How about with some gusto? 6 out of 10. Can we get to 8? Like kind of.
Vegas.
It was like 7. That's fair. Okay, so here we go. We've got structure, we've got power question, we've got paradigm shift. And what are they? Structure is understanding the parts and the whole, meaning how do they relate to the whole? If I have a watch, which I do, and I look at my watch and I see, oh my gosh, my watch has stopped working. And then I look at Cole, I say, oh, Cole's a watchmaker. I go, my friend, my watchmaker friend, look, my watch has stopped working. What would you do with a watch, Cole? You'd open it up. And when you looked inside the watch, how would you know what's gone wrong?
Take it apart.
You take it apart. You take all the pieces and see which piece wasn't working together with which piece. Without understanding the structure, Judge, you can never understand anything. In other words, understanding structure is true of team dynamics. It's true of organizational dynamics. It's true of economic theory. It's true of understanding cause and effect in historical events. Structure is understanding what are the parts and how do they function together. And when you have the structure clear, you have clarity, you defeat vagueness. When the structure is vague or where the pieces aren't named and you don't understand how they correlate to one another, you are in massive trouble. Massive trouble. Joey, what are you in? I was going to think massive, but big's okay. Okay, good. Excellent. So here we go. The parts and the whole. That's what structure is. Power questioning is something that you're familiar with. What thirst is. What thirst is. Imagine yourself, Teddy, in a desert where you haven't drank for hours upon hours and your throat is parched, and as you're about to expire, you smell an oasis nearby and you go there. In the middle of the oasis, there is a gushing spring with a pristinely clean glass next to it. You dip the glass into this cool, refreshing liquid, reciting a benediction. You glug it down. How do you feel? Whoa! Take that same glass, put it next to the bed of Gabriel, a particularly difficult night after he'd been to the shuk and he had met someone called 2B60 for the first time. The next morning, he was not feeling that good, but he knew he had to hydrate. And you see that same glass of water, Gabriel, next to your bed, and you know you have to drink it, but you're not thirsty, but you know you have to drink, but you're not thirsty, and you drink it, and what happens? Yeah, but as good as in the desert, when your throat is parched and when the water is cold and the sun is hot, different experience. One is elated. One is, oh my gosh, this must be the most delicious liquid in the entire world. This is incredible. This is amazing. This is awesome. This is off the charts. Yet when you're drinking for hydration, which is not something you do often, is it, Tom? Or is it, Tom? Can we explore that? No. But if it would be that you're drinking for hydration, it's a very bland experience. It's a bland experience. When you're thirsty, water is delicious. When you're not thirsty, water is bland. When you're thirsty for wisdom, for understanding, for pshat in the Gemara, for pshat in the Toises, for understanding what the sugya is about, when you're thirsty, it is delicious. The experience of learning is fulfilling. You want to go back to the Gemara not because you're from, because you can't wait to hear the answer. When you have no questions, then you have no thirst. When you have no thirst, you have no fulfillment, enjoyment in the understanding, in the experience, and you have no integrated knowledge. Because, and I'm going to use your finger, George, place it like this, thumb. We're going to do the wide arch, moving from your hips. Wide arch. Go together with me. What thirst is to water. Okay, Zachariah. What thirst is to, you can say it out loud. What thirst is to water. Questions are to wisdom. Got that? Yes? Okay. Just 1 second. Could everyone please put your right hand like this, if you don't mind? There we go. 1, 2, 3. What thirst is to water, questions are to wisdom. Okay, that I want that to sink in. Water, there are certain things which have a taste. Coke has a taste. When you drink Coke and you enjoy the sweet taste of Coke, whether it's you're thirsty or not, it has a very strong taste. Correct? Water, when you're not thirsty, it has a bland taste. When you are thirsty, it has a delicious taste. Got it? Learning Torah is the same thing. When you're thirsty, which means when you have questions, and I give you the answer, or you figure out the answer, or you have the question for weeks, and then suddenly the answer pops into your head, you're elated. When I give you that same answer without the thirst, you're nonplussed because it's bland. So what we have to do is we have to learn to cultivate the question. The way you cultivate the question is only once the parts are clear can you begin a seriously and intelligent questioning process. What thirst is to water. Questions are to wisdom. So that's what power questioning is all about. Paradigm shift is the ability, and this is the beginning to the answer to Tom's question. The beginning of the answer of Tom's question is paradigm shift. A paradigm shift means not that you change, not that you make your thinking better, but you make your thinking different. All growth in its most powerful sense is not improvement, it's change. If you think about, if you'd want to make an impact, if you want to make, Teddy, I feel that you have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit within you. Is that true? Okay, so if you want to start off your new business, what would be the most important thing for you to figure out what to do? In terms of the overall overarching goal, would you like to do something is to do something which is, the word that's used is disruptive. Disruptive means it's functioning in a different kind of thinking that was previously, you're thinking about in a way that wasn't thought about before. Disruptive thinking. What we're trying to do is we're trying to become disruptive thinkers in every stage and part of our lives and our analysis of wisdom. What does that mean? This is what paradigm is, and this is what paradigm shift in a very simple illustration occurs. You're on the train, and you see a man next to you sitting on the seat, and he's got two kids. And the two kids is running up and down, running up and down, running up and down, running up and down. And you now think about that person through a lens. The lens is, I understand what good fatherhood is and understand what irresponsibility is. This guy is a bad father and he's being irresponsible. So the way you look at him, you'd make a judgment. Based on your lens, you say, oh, well, this person is an irresponsible father. He's not taking care of his kids. You go up to him and you say to him, sir, your children are running wild on this train. Would you like to please keep them under control? And he looks up at you as if shaken from a dream. And you go, oh, I'm so sorry, he says. I've just come back from the hospital. My wife's in a serious condition. I didn't even notice. You go, oh, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. What happened? Your entire paradigm changes. From looking at him as bad father, irresponsible, wild kids, you look at him as man in intense suffering, unable to concentrate on things in front of him. Instead of feeling judgmental, you feel compassion. That's a paradigm shift. You see the same thing, but you shift one kind of component and then everything changes. We always have to be on the lookout for paradigm shifts. The way you come to a paradigm shift is when you carefully examine the information and look for indications, evidence that your current mode of thinking is faulted in some way. Had this person looked more intently at the face of the man, he may have realized that his facial expression looked distraught, and then he could have perhaps done the paradigm shift himself. In Torah, this paradigm shift is called the Chidush. It's the innovation that the Mishna, the Gemara, the Rashi provides us with. So really, what we want to do is we want to get the structure clear, because remember, this is sequential. Then we have to want to ask all the right questions, which will in turn lead to the paradigm shift, the shifted understanding. And this, my dear friends, is the overarching principle of the study of every kind of Jewish text you could ever come about. In every kind of Jewish text, if you keep these three pillars close to your heart, and you always begin with a structural analysis, these are the parts, this is the order they're in, and there are so many of them, and you count them out, then you ask all the questions, and we'll figure out which questions to ask depending on which text. And then after doing so, you come out to a new realization that was not present when you began examining the text. You'll become capable of defeating the ultimate enemy of the Talmudic student, embracing clarity, dispelling vagueness, and becoming a dynamic, vital learner, because the Torah will start to speak to you in a way that has never spoken to you before. And your experience of learning will become more profound than it's ever been before. And instead of learning because it's an obligation, you'll learn because it's a fascination. And that's where we're trying to get to. Any other questions, thoughts, signs of life? Right, that's the idea. That's the idea. So the question is, that's a good point. In other words, even by me having the question, doesn't mean you're going to have the question. Rav Shach had the question, this person didn't. Rav Shach stayed awake all night because he had the question. The other person heard the question, but wasn't his. So another thing that we're going to be focused on is how do I cultivate my question? Because unless it's my question, it's not going to possess me. So I have to find my question. And the Gemara is beautifully designed in order to cultivate me discovering my own question and my own self in this process. Good. Yes? Yes. Good. 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 Okay. I know this is enormous amounts of information. I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to put you to the test of implementing it in your own study together right now in this room. One more thing. I'm going to discuss how this becomes a reality in the study of Mishnah. And I'm going to introduce you to M.A.T 353. M.A.T stands for Mishnah Analysis Technique. Mishnah Analysis Technique, okay? This is M.A.T 353. And the reason why it's called M.A.T 353 is because underneath the headings of structure, power questioning, and paradigm shift, there are 3, 5, and then 3 questions you need to ask yourself. Underneath structure, you have to go, wow. Underneath processing, you have to do DITS. And underneath paradigm shift, you have to implement www.chidush.com, and this is not a website. It's not a website. I've often taught this class, and people said, I checked out the website and I didn't find it. They said, this is not a website. So I checked it out. I said, were you listening class? They said, in what? So there you go. Wow. When you see coal, when you see a Mishnah, the first thing you do is you go, wow. What is wow? Wow is what are the parts of the Mishnah? How many? You count them. Why in this order? And those are the first 3 questions you ask yourself. What are the parts? How many? Why in this order? Wow. Wow. So you're doing 353 M.A.T. What are the parts? How many? Why in this order? When I say to you, I learned a Mishnah, and it's discussed the following topic of what is the order on the Seder night. That's a certain level of clarity. When I say there were 3 parts to the Mishnah, the first part dealt with the second part and the third. There's a level of clarity which is inescapable. The minute you avoid numbering, you're leaving room for vagueness to penetrate. That's why numbering is such an important component of all clear thinking. Okay. So now what I'd like to do now is I'd like to give you a Mishnah to dissect, and first we're going to do this. Then I'll tell you what these things are, then we'll do those things. Then I'll tell you what these things are, then we'll do those things. So we're actually embodying and practicing the skill as we're learning it. Does that make sense? Good? Okay, so here we go. What are the parts to Mishnah? Now, generally speaking, the way that you discuss a part in a Mishnah is you have to understand the function of the part in relation to the rest of the parts, which means Mishnayos essentially are presenting us with halacha, with halacha. They're not telling me, they're not analyzing. The Gemara is a completely different world. Mishnayos are very straightforward in a certain way. Generally speaking, they're what's called a case or a scenario, and generally speaking, it's followed by a ruling. The 2 primary parts of a Mishnah are case, ruling, case, ruling. However, sometimes the Mishnah gives a reason. That's a third label you may want to use. Sometimes the Mishnah has a question with an answer. That's a fourth and fifth labels you could use. Sometimes the Mishnah presents a halachic ruling without a precedent case. It gives a halachic principle. This is a principle as opposed to a ruling on a specific case. So those are 6 labels you can play around with. Generally, it covers most of what Mishnahs do. Good? What we're going to be learning is we're going to be learning a small little Mishnah because I wanted to keep it simple. The small little Mishnah is located in the chapter called Hamaniach. It's the 3rd chapter of Bava Kama. And there are 2 sheets over here, but maybe we'll just start off with the Mishnah. So these are Mishnah. Just pass it down. It's a Mishnah. And before you start this Mishnah, let me give you a couple of other clues as what you should do when you learn the Mishnah. Just let me take one. The first thing you should do before what are the parts, how many, and why in this order, before you do any of that, you need to read through the Mishnah. You need to read through the Mishnah. Now, when you read through the Mishnah, how do you read through the Mishnah? What kind of reading do you do? A lot of what we're going to be doing in learning is harnessing the full range of our intellectual potential. In order to do that, we need to lock into even our subconscious mind. And the way we lock into our subconscious mind is by being aware that sometimes things awaken what we don't know simply by using our voice. And one of those ways is when we read through a Mishnah in a loud, clear voice, it gets our brain to start thinking about the meaning before you even task it with that. So the first thing you do before even you get onto the 353 is the first thing you do when you say Mishnah is you read it through in a loud and clear voice. And we're going to do that right now. So the Mishnah is located halfway down the page. It's a new parak. And this is how I should read it. Hamaniach es akad b'rshus harabim uvo acher v'nizko bo v'shavro patur v'im huzak bo balachaviz chayev b'nizkoi. You with me? Once you've done that reading, do it 4 times. Then and only then do you do an accurate translation. And the reason why this is a good pre-entry work for the translation is because you've already felt the sentence. So even if you've got a basic knowledge of Hebrew, there'll be certain things that will make sense. Okay? So now, I'm going to do the translation for you, and it has to be precise. Because if the translation is dodgy, so then you're going to lose out on all processing. In other words, in the input stage and the structure stage, if there is a fault in the input of the structure stage, so everything else will go awry, which means if you mistranslate a word, you can have the most brilliant mind, all your thinker will be corrupted. Even if you mix up between plural or tense, person or tense, it will still be bad. You have to be very careful about an accurate and precise translation. Hamaniach, the one that placed, esakad, the jug or pitcher, abbreviation, birshus horabim, birshus 2 words, birshus in the domain of the masses, the public domain, uvo acher, and came someone else, v'niskalbo, and he stumbled on it, v'shavro, and he broke it, patur, he's exempt. V'im huzak ba, and if he is damaged by it, Baal Heshavis, the owner of the barrel, Chayav Benizkoi, is liable for his damages. Okay, so we've done the first 2 things, and now you can divide the parts. What I'd like you to do is find the person next to you and learn B'chavrusa and get this clear.
A few moments later.
Okay, gentlemen. Okay, let's go through this, and then we can move on to the next stage. So, how many parts are there in this Mishnah? Says Ben, 2 parts. Any other offerings? 3 parts. 4 parts. Do I hear 5? Do I hear 5? I'm looking for 5. Can I hear 5? 3, 4, 5, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. Okay. Ben, can you justify your 2-part theory?
There's 2 rulings. You have Matur, which is the end of the first scenario.
Yes.
And you have Hayat, that is called the ruling of the second.
Excellent. So there are 2 rulings.
Yeah.
Does that mean there are 2 parts?
Well, I guess you could split the rulings into parts too.
And then there would be?
4.
Excellent, which is what Tom's contention is. Now, 3 parts. Who said 3 parts? Tell us about 3 parts.
I think there's a case of someone putting something in the Shiur on it, and someone tripping on it.
Yes.
So there's 2 rulings that come back.
There are 2 rulings that come out of it. Are there 2 cases?
There are 2 separate cases. One of them is that he broke it,
Right.
and the other one is that he got damaged by it.
Excellent. So I don't mean to be very divisive, but arithmetically speaking, when you have 2 cases and 2 rulings, that makes 3 parts or 4 parts? I think 4. See, there we go. The problem wasn't in analysis; it was in addition, which is a hard thing to do. I'm joking. Now, in other words, you initially understood that the second case is actually an extension of the first, so you incorporate it into the first case, which is a fair thing to do. I would like to differentiate it because it's got a whole new halakhic component which is damaging the other. Jad,
I think that's a continuation of the second case.
not arguing.
I agree it's 3 then.
Okay, get out. I'll tell you.
I disagree with Judd.
Okay.
I disagree with Judd.
Or would you like to vocalize your disagreement?
Sure. If you're going to say that it's one case, then if the individual who tripped and broke the item doesn't get damaged, then you don't have a case at all. And what happens in the scenario where... No, but it says that he broke the jug, which then you analyze his putter, but then he got damaged himself. But if that element of him not getting damaged doesn't apply, then essentially you don't have a case.
In other words, if it's one case, if you had half of it, it wouldn't be a case. That's Joey's contention. So you see that the case could have stopped halfway and would still have been a valid case, which means the extension, even though it's a continuation of what happened, but it's a different halakhic entity and therefore it's a different case. Good? Good?
Can you show me where the cases where you say it says this is the beginning of the first case?
I absolutely will, George. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
Stay tuned. Before that, I'm just going to get Cole. Okay, can I get Cole first?
Sure.
Go for it, Cole.
About the order of the Mishna,
Yes.
if the object didn't break but the one who tripped got hurt, would the owner still be liable? The order seems that he may not be liable to pay damages for the one who tripped.
In other words, you're saying it could even be that I initially understood that the damage came about through a person being lacerated by the shards. Right. Says Cole, perhaps not. Perhaps they're 2 separate cases even from the get-go. First case is you put a jug in the public domain, someone came in and broke it. In that case, the break is exempt. The second case is he didn't break it, he knocked his foot on it and broke his ankle and the jug remained intact. Still, the owner would be liable to pay for his damages. In other words, the second case is independent of what occurred in the first case. It could be dependent, but it doesn't have to be dependent. It's amazing. Great, Tom, what do you think? You come out. Now, I just want to narrate this, because what's happening over here is the way that we're generating this idea war and this clarification of what's going on is not through looking at what other people say, but looking inside of ourselves in our analysis and discussing it. The nature of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, is it comes alive through discussion, and that's exactly what's happened right now. So be very wary of running to commentators, which we never do until we've done the analysis ourselves. We're not looking at Rashi, we're not looking at Tosfos, we're looking at the understanding of the text. And therefore we apply the 353 in its entirety before looking at anyone. Because we want to, as we explained previously, own our own kasha. Good? Excellent. Now I'm going to show you in the words, if I may, please, Jordan. Says the Mishnah, part 1, there was a person that placed the picture in the public domain, uvo acher, and came another, v'niskal ba, and he stumbled upon it, v'shavra, and he broke it. End of part 1. What happens in that case? Implied in that case, Teddy, is a dilemma. Is he exempt or is he liable? Here's the ruling. Potter is exempt. Part 3. V'im huzak ba, and if he was damaged by it, case 2. Ruling 2. Ba'al hachavis, the owner of the barrel, chayav benizkoi, is liable for his damages. Good? Chayav benizkoi, the owner of the barrel, is liable for his damages, the damages of the person that sustained the wound, the tripper. Yes, Ben?
Should we assume that there's 3 participants in this whole Mishnah, or
2?
2.
Don't worry, I know what your question is. We'll explore it shortly. Tom?
Can I ask a question that gets into the word meanings?
No. Good. Now, why did I say no to Tom's question? The answer is one of the most important things we're going to be doing when we learn the structure of learning is what's called restraint of impulsivity. Gabriel. Restraint of impulsivity, Teddy, is that in order for us to do this thoroughly, Mishael, we need to be able to do things first, the first things first and second things second. What very often happens, and actually what sabotages our clarity of understanding and learning, is we ask a question prematurely. And when we ask a question prematurely, what happens is we fail in understanding what the text has to say. Because before we've got the structure right, we ask a question, and then we don't actually formalize and form the structure in a proper way, which allows the question to actually be asked in a way that doesn't disrupt or just demolish what we've already learned. You have to be very careful about demolition questions. Yes, Ben?
How do we know if we have the correct translation in the beginning and we discover later on that there's actually a word that could be translated totally differently? It changes our understanding of the Mishnah.
Right. That is an unavoidable hazard of Talmudic study. Hopefully by your knowledge of Hebrew and your context, you're going to get the right translation. And if you don't, that's okay, because that will form the part of the process of you'll come up with the grandstanding, and then something won't work. And then, oh my gosh, you know what? And then when you fix that problem, then you have to, everything else will fall into place. Zechariah.
So we say here the him and it. The confusion of whether that's a subcase or a related but separate case is the linking of the vav. And like, are we meant to therefore not assume that we have this and that presented here? That the second clause is independent?
Well, two things. Simply speaking, it is a continuation, simply speaking. But it could also be a continuation in concept, not a continuation in the actual occurrence. But even more than that, very often in Mishnaic Hebrew, the vav can act as an or, not an and. Oh yes. Oh yes. Okay. Yes.
So when you're separating the Mishnah into parts, like Chayav and Potter, the only words you put in the moving section?
Absolutely. Oh, I suppose Chayav ben Nizko in the end. Chayav ben Nizko. Okay. I think in terms of bandwidth, I think that's enough for today. Tomorrow we'll go on to the 5 and the 3. And